The Persian Gulf is not a place that forgives misunderstanding. It is shallow, averaging only 35 meters depth across most of its basin, with large areas significantly shallower than that. Warm, congested, and threaded with shipping lanes that carry an extraordinary proportion of the world's energy supply through a body of water that is, in strategic terms, one of the most dangerous corridors on Earth. Tankers move through it around the clock, enormous vessels carrying millions of barrels of crude oil from the terminals of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, the UAE, and Qatar toward the Strait of Hormuz and the global markets beyond. The math of those movements is not abstract. A significant disruption to tanker traffic in the Persian Gulf, lasting even 48 hours, produces measurable effects on global energy prices. A disruption lasting a week would be felt in every economy on the planet. Everyone who operates in these waters understands this arithmetic, and some actors, for reasons of doctrine and ideology and calculated coercion, have decided that the arithmetic is a weapon. Iran has mined the Persian Gulf before, not recently, not in the sense of a declared act of war, but in the tanker war of the 1980s. Iranian mines damaged dozens of vessels, including the USS Samuel B. Roberts in 1988, nearly sinking a warship in international waters through a method that requires no engagement, no confrontation, no risk to the laying crew. A mine does not need to be brave. It does not need communication or command authority in the moment it detonates. It simply needs to be placed correctly, in the right depth of water, on the right shipping lane, and then it waits with the patience of an inanimate object. That patience is its lethality. The intelligence picture that had been building for 72 hours was precise about certain things and uncertain about others. It was precise about the IRGC Navy activity pattern in the Central Gulf, the unusual concentration of fast boats and support vessels in an area that contained no scheduled exercise and no declared patrol operation. It was uncertain about what, specifically, that activity had produced. The concern, assessed at the classified level and shared across the Fifth Fleet intelligence apparatus, was that the IRGC had used the cover of a routine patrol cycle to conduct a covert mine-laying operation along the western edge of the primary northbound tanker traffic lane, the lane used by laden tankers departing the Ras Tanura terminal and transiting toward Hormuz. The concern was not confirmed. It was assessed. And in naval mine warfare, the difference between a confirmed minefield and an assessed potential minefield is the difference between a known danger and a danger that might not be there, or might be exactly where someone thinks it is, waiting. It was a Tuesday. The time was 8:19 local. The Gulf was flat, wind under 5 knots, visibility unlimited, the surface of the water in the early morning looking almost thick in the heat haze that began building before the sun had cleared the eastern horizon. An Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer was operating in the Central Gulf, approximately 40 nautical miles east of Bahrain, positioned at the northern approach to the tanker traffic lane. That was the focus of the intelligence assessment. She had been tasked by Fifth Fleet with 2 simultaneous missions: mine countermeasures, coordination, supporting the MH-53E Sea Dragon helicopters that were conducting airborne mine hunting operations along the assessed threat corridor, and surface presence, providing a visible naval escort capability for the tanker traffic that had been notified of the potential threat and was awaiting clearance before resuming transit. 3 tankers were currently holding positions south of the assessed area, their captains in radio contact with the destroyer, their engines at standby, 2 million barrels of crude oil sitting in the water, waiting for someone to tell them it was safe to proceed. Every hour those tankers held position cost money, generated diplomatic pressure, and added to the narrative that Iran was succeeding in its coercion campaign simply by creating uncertainty. The destroyer's commanding officer understood all of this. He understood that the mission was not purely military. It was economic, diplomatic, and psychological simultaneously, and that the outcome of the next several hours would be measured not just in mines found or IRGC boats turned back, but in whether those 3 tankers were able to resume their transit before the close of business in the commodity markets that were watching this situation in real time. At 8:31, the tactical picture developed in 2 directions simultaneously. The first development came from the MH-53E operating in the suspected minefield area, the Sea Dragon's AQS-24 mine-hunting sonar, a side-looking sonar system specifically designed for mine detection in shallow water, had been conducting systematic sweeps of the traffic lane since first light. At 8:31, the aircraft sensor operator reported a contact on the sonar display, a bottom object at 11 meters depth, bearing consistent with the traffic lane center line, classified as possible moored mine, confidence level moderate. The object had the shape and acoustic reflectivity signature of a mine rather than a natural bottom feature. It was not confirmed. Confirmation required visual identification either by diver or by remote vehicle. But it was assessed with sufficient confidence to mark the contact and expand the search pattern around it. The second development came from the surface picture. The destroyer's radar, operating in the coastal clutter environment of the Central Gulf, had been tracking a cluster of small contacts near the Iranian-administered islands, approximately 22 nautical miles to the northeast. The contacts had been in that area for 2 hours, small enough to be fast boats, moving slowly enough to suggest loitering rather than transit. At 8:31, 6 of those contacts began moving southwest at 24 knots. Course southwest, bearing directly toward the destroyer's position and the area where the MH-53E was conducting its mine-hunting operations. In the Combat Information Center, the watch team registered both developments within 45 seconds of each other. The officer of the deck looked at the surface picture and at the helicopter's mine contact report simultaneously and reached for his headset. "Captain, CIC. Mine contact from the Sea Dragon, moderate confidence. 6 surface contacts, assessed IRGC fast boats, bearing 04522 miles, closing at 24 knots. Request your presence." The captain arrived in 60 seconds. He absorbed both pieces of the picture, the sonar contact in the traffic lane, the fast boats closing from the northeast, and understood immediately what he was looking at. The mine contact, if confirmed, was the purpose. The fast boats were the cover. A response force deployed to complicate the mine clearance operation, to create a surface threat that would force the destroyer to divide its attention between the mine-hunting mission and its own defense, to make the entire operation more difficult and more dangerous, and ideally, to produce a confrontation that would generate the kind of international incident that Iran could use politically, regardless of how it resolved militarily. This was not improvisation. This was a plan, and the captain had read the intelligence products that described this plan. The IRGC doctrine for layered maritime coercion, combining mine threats with surface harassment to maximize the defensive burden on opposing naval forces. He had read it, wargamed it, and briefed his department heads on it 2 weeks before this deployment began. "All right," he said. "The Sea Dragon stays on the mine contact. That is the priority. Nothing changes for that crew." He turned to the surface warfare coordinator. "The fast boats, what's their CPA at current course and speed?" "Projecting to approximately 8 miles, sir. Timeline 37 minutes. Keep tracking. Do not react yet." He looked at the MH-60R crew status board. "Get the Seahawk airborne. A SW configuration secondary. I want it positioned between us and the fast boats with the FLIR running. I want eyes on those boats before they get inside 15 miles. He turned to the communications officer. "Channel 16 and the IRGC guard frequency. Monitor both. Anything they transmit, I want to know instantly." He looked at the entire tactical picture for a moment. The mine contact to the west, the fast boats to the northeast, the 3 tankers holding to the south, the Sea Dragon working its sonar pattern in between. The geometry was complex, and it was designed to be complex. Complexity was the weapon, overwhelming a defender's decision cycle with simultaneous demands from multiple directions was the operational logic behind the IRGC's approach. The captain's response was to simplify, prioritize, sequence. First, the mine contact. Everything else was secondary to determining whether that sonar return was a mine, and if so, clearing it. The traffic lane could not reopen until that question was answered. He directed the MH-53E to continue its prosecution and tasked a second asset, an EOD dive team, aboard the destroyer that had been on standby since the previous evening, to prepare for a possible dive operation if the sonar contact required visual confirmation. Second, the fast boats. The Seahawk was airborne at 8:44, climbing to 1,500 feet and banking northeast toward the inbound IRGC formation. In the CIC, the Surface Warfare Coordinator tracked it to its intercept position. At 1,500 feet with its FLIR running, the Seahawk could see and classify the fast boats at 20 miles, far beyond the range at which the boats could do anything meaningful, and would have a clear, continuous, recorded picture of everything the IRGC formation did from this point forward. Third, the communications. At 8:47, the captain dictated a transmission on Channel 16 in English and Farsi simultaneously. Why, IRGC naval vessels bearing 045 from position Gulf Charlie 7. This is a United States Navy warship. You are approaching a maritime security operation being conducted in international waters in accordance with international law. A mine countermeasures operation is currently active in this area. For the safety of all vessels, you are advised to reduce speed and maintain a distance of no less than 10 nautical miles from this unit and from the designated mine clearance zone. All your movements are being recorded and transmitted to United States Naval Forces Central Command. This is our advisory. The message was transmitted, logged, and relayed to 5th Fleet and NavCent simultaneously. Whatever happened next, the record would show that the United States had communicated clearly, professionally, and with legal precision before taking any further action. At 8:52, the IRGC fast boats did not respond on the radio and did not reduce speed. The Seahawk pilot reached the intercept position at 0854 and established his FLIR track on the lead fast boat. The image on the CIC display was sharp. 6 IRGC fast boats in a loose column formation, each approximately 20 meters in length, armed with what appeared to be heavy machine guns on the forward mount. The crews were visible on the FLIR's thermal imaging, standing, active, not resting. These were not boats returning from a routine patrol. They were crewed for action. At sea, distance is language. 6 armed fast boats at 24 knots, 12 miles out and closing, said something very specific about intent. At 8:57, the Sea Dragon crew transmitted a second mine contact report, a second sonar return 300 meters south of the first, same acoustic classification, possible moored mine, moderate confidence. 2 contacts. If both were confirmed, the minefield was not an isolated object. It was a field, a deliberate obstacle placed across the traffic lane to deny passage to laden tankers drawing up to 22 meters of draft in water that averaged 35 meters depth at this location. The captain looked at the second mine contact and at the IRGC boats simultaneously. The pressure was building from both directions at once, which was precisely the intent. How long for EOD confirmation of the first contact? Minimum 90 minutes for dive preparation and execution, sir. 90 minutes. The fast boats would reach their projected CPA in 23 minutes. The geometry would not wait for the dive team. At 9:02, the captain authorized the next step. The Seahawk descended from 1,500 feet to 500 and activated its non-lethal directed energy system, painting the lead IRGC fast boat's forward deck with 3 precise pulses from the green laser designator. The message was the one that transcended language and doctrine and culture. We can reach you from here. We can see everything on your deck. And we have chosen to demonstrate that rather than to escalate further. Simultaneously, the destroyer increased speed from 12 to 18 knots and altered course 2 degrees to place itself between the approaching IRGC formation and the area where the Sea Dragon was conducting its mine-hunting operations. The movement was deliberate and visible, a positioning that told the IRGC commanders that the mine clearance operation would continue regardless of their approach, and that placing their boats between the fast boats and the Sea Dragon would require them to pass through the destroyer's position first. On Channel 16, the communications officer transmitted a second message, shorter this time. IRGC vessels, you are now at 11 miles. The mine clearance operation is ongoing and will continue. Your current course will bring you into the active clearance zone. Reduce speed and alter course immediately. This is our final advisory before we take additional defensive measures. The geometry tightens. In the CIC, the Surface Warfare Coordinator updated the CPA calculation every 30 seconds, his voice steady and precise with each new number. At 9:09, the lead IRGC fast boat reduced speed, 24 knots to 17, then to 12. The change was gradual, slow enough that it might have been a mechanical issue or a navigation adjustment rather than a response to the destroyer's positioning. But the mathematics of the CPA updated from 8 miles to 11. The boats were opening range, not closing it. At 9:12, two of the trailing fast boats peeled off to the east, turning away from the destroyer's track and beginning a slow arc that would take them back toward the Iranian island complex to the northeast. The remaining 4 held their position at approximately 11 miles, engines idling, holding a stationary pattern that placed them outside the range at which they posed an immediate threat, but close enough to maintain their presence as a complicating factor. The captain watched the formation stabilize at 11 miles. He watched the Seahawk maintain its orbit above the lead boat. He watched the surface warfare coordinator update the CPA to 13 miles. And holding, he turned back to the mine situation. Sea Dragon, maintain your pattern. I want both contacts prosecuted fully before we call in the EOD team. How long for a complete sonar sweep of the corridor? Approximately 40 minutes for full coverage, sir. Do it. The boats are not going anywhere for now. At 9:51, the Sea Dragon completed its full corridor sweep. Total mine contacts, 4, all assessed at moderate to high confidence. The contacts were distributed across a 300-meter width of the traffic lane's center line, at depths between 9 and 13 meters, spaced at irregular intervals across approximately 1 nautical mile of corridor. It was not an improvised field. The spacing and depth profile were consistent with deliberate, doctrine-guided mine placement designed to create maximum risk to deeply laden vessels transiting at normal speeds. The EOD team was in the water at 10:14, working in pairs, using underwater propulsion vehicles in the warm, relatively shallow water of the Gulf. They reached the first contact at 10:31. Visual confirmation came at 10:34. A SADAF mine, Iranian manufacture, moored at 11 meters depth, still live. The confirmation was transmitted to the destroyer and relayed immediately to Fifth Fleet. The minefield was real. What followed was methodical, patient, and entirely professional. The EOD team worked contact by contact across the corridor, neutralizing each mine in sequence using shaped charge demolition. The Sea Dragon continued its sonar sweeps, searching for additional contacts outside the initial pattern. The Seahawk maintained its orbit above the IRGC fast boat formation, which remained stationary at 11 to 13 miles throughout the clearance operation, its crews watching what they could see across the water and receiving whatever the destroyer's movements told them about the progress of the operation. By 14:22, all 4 confirmed mine contacts had been neutralized. A 5th contact, detected late in the afternoon sweep, was investigated and assessed as a bottom obstruction, not a mine. The corridor was declared clear by the EOD team leader at 14:44. The clearance was confirmed by the Sea Dragon sonar team at 15:03. The captain transmitted the clearance to Fifth Fleet and NavCent at 15:09. The notification to the holding tankers came 3 minutes later. The first tanker began its transit at 1531, proceeding north through a corridor that had been made safe by 8 hours of mine clearance work conducted under the watchful proximity of 6 IRGC fast boats that had never come closer than 11 miles. The IRGC formation turned northeast at 1544 and began moving back toward the island complex. The Seahawk tracked them until they passed into Iranian territorial waters at 1602 and then broke off, returning to the destroyer's flight deck. In the CIC, the watch team logged the departure of the fast boats and updated the surface picture. Clean now. The threat contact's gone. The tanker's moving. The captain stood at the tactical display as the first tanker's AIS track began moving north through the cleared corridor. He watched it for a moment without speaking. "Full reconstruction," he said. "Timeline from first mine contact to corridor clearance. Every IRGC boat track, every radio transmission, every sonar contact, every EOD action, logged with precise timestamps. I want the complete package, including the mine type identification and depth profile at 5th Fleet and NAV sent within 90 minutes. Include the SADAF confirmation photographs from the EOD team." He looked around the CIC. "That's how you clear a minefield under pressure," he said. "You clear the minefield." He left it there. No elaboration. The tanker was moving. The corridor was open. The work was done. What had unfolded across 8 hours in the central Persian Gulf was not a single dramatic confrontation, but a sustained, multi-domain operation conducted simultaneously against a mine threat and a surface harassment force, under time pressure, in water, where the consequences of error were measured in tanker crews and commodity prices, and the credibility of American guarantees to the regional partners who depended on those guarantees for their economic security. The IRGC had designed the operation to be overwhelming. Too many problems, too many vectors, too little time. The design was competent. It reflected a genuine understanding of how to complicate an adversary's decision cycle. What the design could not account for was an adversary who had studied it in exactly this level of detail, who had pre-positioned the right assets in the right configuration before the operation began, who had trained the discipline to prioritize under pressure, and who executed with a kind of steady professional competence that looks easy from the outside and is anything but. The Persian Gulf will see more minefields. The IRGC will lay them again in some future moment of tension, with some variation of the doctrine it has developed over decades of asymmetric maritime competition with the United States. The question is never whether the mines will appear. The question is whether the force that finds them will be ready. With the sensors, the EOD capability, the surface escort, the communications discipline, and above all, the command judgment to manage all of it simultaneously without losing the thread. On this Tuesday, in 35 meters of warm Gulf water, the answer to that question had been demonstrated across 8 hours and 4 neutralized mines and 1 open shipping lane and 3 tankers proceeding north. The answer, as always, was preparation and the patience to execute it correctly when it matters most.